My dear friends, forever shift and nod. The moment I stopped trying to impress people and started standing in my truth, everything about how people treated me changed. Let me be clear about something right away. I didn't wake up one day looking different. I didn't suddenly get louder, richer, tougher, or more impressive. What changed wasn't my appearance. What changed was how I stood inside myself. My spine got straighter, and people felt it before they ever heard a word come out of my mouth. For a long time, I was doing what many of us do. I was shrinking just a little to make others comfortable, softening my words so no one felt challenged, explaining myself too much just in case someone misunderstood my intentions, always trying to be reasonable, agreeable, likable, and on the surface it worked. People smiled, conversations stayed polite. But underneath that politeness was something else, dismissiveness. I wasn't being taken seriously because I wasn't taking myself seriously. Here's the uncomfortable truth I had to face. People don't respond to what you say first. They respond to what you believe about yourself. And I was unknowingly telling the world, I'm not fully sure I belong here. So I stopped doing one thing, just one. I stopped apologizing for my presence, not in a rude way, not in an arrogant way, in a grounded way. I stopped entering rooms asking for permission with my energy. I started speaking like my words deserved air. I paused instead of rushing. I listened without preparing a defense. And when I spoke plainly. No over-explaining, no shrinking, no self-discount. That's when something interesting happened. People leaned in. Interruptions stopped. I stayed on me longer. Same voice, same ideas, different posture internally. I realized confidence isn't about proving anything. It's about not asking to be erased. It's about being comfortable taking up the space your life already earned. When you do that, people recalibrate how they treat you. Not because you demanded it, but because you modeled it. And listen, this wasn't overnight. It was a series of small choices. Choosing honesty over politeness, choosing clarity over approval, choosing to say, this matters to me without justifying why it should matter to anyone else. That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. It tells people, I'm here on purpose. And the world responds differently to someone who knows why they're in the room. If you've ever felt overlooked, talked over, or understated, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to be louder or tougher. You need to stop folding yourself in half to fit into rooms that were built for full human beings. Well, I didn't change my face. I didn't change my voice. I changed how firmly I stood behind my own existence. And once I did that, people had no choice but to see me differently. There was a moment, quiet, ordinary, easy to miss when everything shifted. Someone questioned a decision I made. Not aggressively, not even rudely, just that familiar tone that says, are you sure you know what you're doing? And normally I would have jumped in right away. I would have laid out my reasoning step by step, added context, softened my stance, tried to bring them along so they felt comfortable with my choice. But this time I didn't. I'm just saying, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And then I stopped talking. The silence felt loud. My mind wanted to fill it. My instincts were screaming, explain yourself, make them understand, don't let this feel awkward. But I stayed still, calm, grounded, not defensive, not cold, just settled. And something unexpected happened. And me scrapped. They nodded. That was it. No debate, no pushback, no subtle dismissal. The conversation moved on, but the energy didn't go back to normal. It shifted, in a good way. That's when it hit me. Over-explaining isn't clarity. It's insecurity dressed up as politeness. When you explain yourself too much, you're not helping people understand. You're asking them to approve. And people can feel that. Even if they don't consciously know it, they sense when you're negotiating your own authority. I had spent years thinking that being understood meant being respected. But that's not how it works. Respect comes first, understanding follows. The truth is, people don't need access to every thought you've had to trust you. They need to feel that you trust yourself. And nothing communicates self-trust more clearly than knowing when to stop talking. This doesn't mean becoming dismissive or closed off. It doesn't mean refusing to answer real questions or shutting people down. It means recognizing the difference between a genuine conversation and a subtle test of your confidence. Some questions aren't requests for information. They're probes. And when you rush to justify yourself, you hand over power without realizing it. When I stopped explaining myself unnecessarily, people didn't think I was rude. They thought I was clear. They didn't see me as difficult. They saw me as decisive. The same people who once questioned me started checking in differently. Their tone changed, their posture changed, because mine had. Here's what I learned. You don't owe the world a running commentary on your choices. You don't need to convince everyone that your instincts are valid. You're allowed to say less and mean more. And the most surprising part, the more comfortable I became with silence, the more weight my words carried. When I did explain something, people actually listened because they knew I wasn't doing it out of doubt. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Confidence isn't about having all the answers ready. It's about being okay if not everyone agrees with you. The day I stopped explaining myself was the day people stopped questioning whether I belonged in the conversation. And once that happened, everything else started to change. For a long time, I thought confidence looked a certain way. Big voice, sharp opinions, always ready with a response. I thought if I wasn't dominating the room, I was losing ground in it. But that idea came from watching performances, not from understanding power. Real confidence doesn't rush. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't need to win every moment. Real confidence is grounded. You can feel it before it speaks. I started noticing something interesting. The people who carried the most influence weren't always the loudest. They weren't constantly proving how much they knew. They spoke slower. They listened longer. And when they finally said something, it landed. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was deliberate. So I tried something different, and I slowed down. I stopped reacting to everything immediately. I let conversations breathe. I let pauses exist without feeling the need to rescue them. And instead of filling space with noise, I started filling it with intention. At first, it felt uncomfortable. Silence can feel like exposure when you're used to talking your way into safety. But then I realized something powerful. When you're grounded, silence works for you, not against you. People began to mirror that calm. Meetings felt less chaotic. Conversations felt more focused. And without trying to command attention, I had it. That's the thing about grounded confidence. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It's already at ease with itself. And that ease is contagious. I also learned that confidence doesn't mean certainty about everything. It means comfort with not knowing. I started saying, I'll think about that, instead of forcing an answer. I admitted when I needed more time, and instead of weakening my position, it strengthened it. Because people trust someone who isn't afraid of honesty. Grounded confidence says, I don't need to perform for you. I'm present with you. And presence, real presence, is rare. In a world where everyone is trying to be impressive, being present stands out. Here's another shift that mattered. I stopped confusing passion with pressure. You don't need to push your point for it to be valid. If something is solid, it doesn't need to be shoved down anyone's throat. It can stand on its own. When you believe that, your energy changes. You stop chasing agreement. You stop bracing for resistance. You speak because it's true to you, not because you need a reaction.
Whether stereo till less more time you should watch getting sport. I'm to second with that. This stereo and shadow.
If you've ever felt like you need to raise your voice to be taken seriously, I want you to try the opposite. Lower it, slow it, trust it. Confidence isn't about taking over the room. It's about being so grounded that the room adjusts to you. Once I understood that, I stopped trying to sound confident, and I started being it. And people felt the difference immediately. Here's something no one tells you early enough. People learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. Not what you say about self-respect, but what you tolerate, what you laugh off, what you let slide. For a long time, I told myself I was being flexible, easygoing, understanding. But if I'm honest, a lot of that was just avoidance. I didn't want tension. I didn't want to seem difficult. So I stayed quiet when something didn't sit right. I accepted half commitments. I let my time be taken for granted. And slowly, without anyone meaning to, my value in the room started to blur. The shift began when I stopped abandoning myself to keep the peace. Not dramatically, not with confrontations or ultimatums, just with small, consistent acts of self-respect. Saying no without a speech, holding eye contact when I disagreed, following through on my boundaries even when it felt awkward. At first, some people were surprised. A few pushed back, not because I was wrong, but because the rules had changed. And whenever you change the rules of how you show up, the world needs a moment to adjust. But here's the key. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I stayed calm and steady. And that steadiness did more than any explanation ever could. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you demonstrate. When I started honoring my own time, people stopped wasting it. When I stopped laughing at things that crossed a line, the line stopped being crossed. When I treated my words like they mattered, others listened as if they did too. And what surprised me most was this: people didn't like me less. The right people liked me more. The relationships that were built on mutual respect grew stronger. The ones that relied on me being endlessly accommodating either adjusted or faded. And honestly, that was a relief. Self-respect simplifies your life. It filters noise. It clarifies who's actually listening and who is just comfortable with you being quiet. I also learned that self-respect isn't rigid. It's not about being harsh or closed off. It's about being clear, warm but firm, open but grounded. You can be kind and still say no. You can be understanding and still draw a line. You can be compassionate without sacrificing yourself. The moment I internalized that, something shifted in how people approached me. Conversations became more direct. Commitments became more solid. Even disagreements felt cleaner. Less personal, more honest. Because when you respect yourself, you set the tone. And most people will meet you there. If you've been waiting for others to value you more, start here. Check the places where you're quietly lowering the bar for yourself. That's not humility, that's self-neglect. Raise the standard gently, consistently, and without apology. People may not notice the first time, but they will feel it. And eventually, they'll catch up. There's a cost to everything. We just don't always see the price tag until later. And approval? Approval is one of the most expensive things you can chase because you never really own it. For a long time, I thought wanting approval was just part of being human. And it is to a point. We all want to belong. We all want to be seen. But somewhere along the way, I crossed a line without noticing. I stopped checking in with myself and started checking the room first. Before I spoke, I'd ask, how will this land? Before I decided, I'd ask, will this disappoint anyone? And slowly, my compass drifted. Not dramatically, quietly. The problem with approval is that it feels like safety, it feels like harmony. But what it really does is outsource your self-trust. You start shaping your choices around reactions you can't control. And the more you do that, the more invisible you become to yourself. Here's the moment it clicked for me. No matter how carefully you manage people's expectations, someone will still be unhappy. Someone will still misunderstand you. Someone will still project their own fears onto your choices. So if disappointment is unavoidable, the real question becomes, who do you want to disappoint? Others or yourself? When I stopped prioritizing approval, I didn't become careless. I became clearer. I started making decisions I could stand behind, even if they weren't immediately popular. And yes, there was discomfort. Growth always has some friction. But there was also relief. I wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't adjusting my truth mid-sentence to make it easier to swallow. I said what I meant what I said, and let people have their reactions without trying to manage them. And something surprising happened. People trusted me more. Because approval seeking is unpredictable, it changes with the crowd, but self-led clarity, that's consistent. And people feel safer around consistency even when they don't agree with it. I also noticed how much energy approval had been draining. All that second guessing, all that emotional math. Once I let it go, I had more space to actually show up, to listen, to engage, to think long-term instead of reacting in the moment. Approval asks, do you like me? Clarity asks, is this true to me?
One keeps you small, the other helps you grow.
This doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop letting their comfort override your conscience. It means choosing alignment over applause. And here's the truth no one tells you when you stop chasing approval. The respect you get is quieter, but deeper. It's not handed out freely, it's earned over time. And it lasts. Approval is borrowed. The legs of Isis, the horse don't minutron. Once I understood that, I stopped paying for validation with pieces of myself. And people saw me differently because I finally did. Comfort is persuasive. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It tells you to keep things smooth, to avoid hard conversations, to say maybe when you really mean no. And for a long time, I listened to it because comfort feels like peace. But comfort isn't peace. It's just quiet avoidance. I started noticing how often I chose comfort at the expense of clarity. I'd leave things unsaid and then carry them with me. I'd agree to things that didn't feel right and then feel resentful later. On the outside, everything looked fine. On the inside, things were messy. Clarity, on the other hand, felt risky. Clear words create reactions. They draw lines. They make things visible. Visibility can be uncomfortable, especially if you've spent years trying not to rock the boat. But here's what I learned. Unclear situations don't stay neutral. They slowly turn into confusion, frustration, and distance. What you don't address today, you pay for tomorrow with interest. The first time I chose clarity over comfort, my heart was racing. I said something I'd been holding back, not harshly, not dramatically, just honestly. I expected tension. I expected fallout. What I got was relief, not because the conversation was easy, but because it was clean. There was no guessing, no reading between the lines, no emotional residue left behind. Everything was on the table. And even where we didn't fully agree, there was mutual understanding. Clarity clears the air. Comfort just avoids it. I began to realize that most of the stress we carry isn't from hard moments. It's from postponed ones. The conversations we rehearse but never have, the boundaries we imagine but never state, the truths we soften until they lose shape. When I started choosing clarity, my relationships became simpler. Not always easier, but more honest. People knew where I stood. I knew where they stood. And that mutual knowing created a deeper kind of respect. Clarity also changed how I showed up with myself. I stopped pretending I was okay with things I wasn't. I listened when something felt off instead of pushing it down. And that self-honesty made external honesty feel more natural. Here's the thing, clarity doesn't require cruelty. You can be clear and kind at the same time. You can speak directly without being sharp. The goal isn't to win, it's to be real. And when you're real, people respond differently. They may not always like what you say, but they trust that you mean it. And the moment I made clarity my default, my life felt lighter. Conversations became cleaner. My energy returned. And people stopped guessing who I was because I stopped hiding it. Clarity didn't just change my relationships. It changed how people looked at me. For a long time, I thought being taken seriously meant becoming sharper, harder, more intimidating. I thought I had to borrow someone else's tone, someone else's style, someone else's way of commanding a room. But every time I tried that, it felt off, like wearing a jacket that looked powerful on someone else but didn't quite fit me. That's when I realized something important. Presence doesn't come from imitation, it comes from alignment. The goal was never to become someone else. The goal was to become so clear in who I already was that there was no confusion about it. When you're aligned, you don't have to announce yourself. Your energy introduces you before your words do. People know what you stand for because your actions repeat the same message over and over again. I stopped trying to adjust my personality to fit expectations. I kept my warmth. I kept my empathy. I didn't trade them in for toughness. Unmistakable people aren't loud caricatures. They're consistent. They don't shift depending on who's watching. Their values show up the same way in public and in private. That consistency builds trust, and trust builds influence. I also learned that being unmistakable means letting go of being universally liked. If everyone feels comfortable around you, you're probably editing yourself too much. Real presence creates resonance, not consensus. Some people leaned in more when I became clearer. Others stepped back. Both reactions were useful. One showed me where connection lived. The other showed me where I had been overcompensating. And here's the freeing part. Once I stopped trying to manage how I came across, I actually came across better. My words felt cleaner. My body felt calmer. I wasn't performing, I was participating. Becoming unmistakable doesn't mean branding yourself. It means trusting yourself. It means letting your yes be solid and your no be clean. It means speaking from your center instead of your fear. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a tougher shell. You don't need to silence your softness. You need to anchor it. When softness is anchored, it's not weakness. It's strength without armor. Once I understood that, I stopped asking, how do I sound? And started asking, is this true? That single shift changed everything. People no longer tried to define me for me. They responded to what was clearly there. I didn't become someone else. I became unmistakably myself. And that's when people stopped overlooking me and started listening. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. Nothing I've shared is reserved for a special kind of person. This isn't about status, charisma, or being naturally confident. It's about choices, small, quiet choices you make every day about how you show up. You don't need to flip a switch and become fearless. You don't need to reinvent yourself. Change doesn't start with a dramatic moment. It starts the next time you pause instead of rushing, the next time you tell the truth without padding it, the next time you honor what you feel instead of explaining it away. That's where the shift begins. People don't suddenly see you differently because you demand it. They see you differently because you do. Your posture changes. Your timing changes. Your words land differently because they're coming from a place of self-trust, not self-doubt. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about controlling how others perceive you. It's about freeing yourself from needing to. When you stop trying to manage every reaction, you become more present. When you're present, you're more grounded. And when you're grounded, people feel it. They don't always know why, but they respond. You'll notice it in small ways at first. Fewer interruptions, more eye contact, different questions. Then bigger things, being trusted with responsibility, being heard in rooms that once felt closed, being approached instead of overlooked. But even if none of that happened, this would still be worth it. Because the real change isn't external, it's internal. It's the relief of not abandoning yourself to fit in. It's the calm that comes from knowing you're aligned. And from that place, everything else becomes easier. You don't wake up anxious about how you'll be perceived. You don't rehearse conversations in your head as much. You don't feel the need to prove your worth. You just show up, and that's enough. So if you've been waiting for a sign, let this be it. Start with one moment of clarity, one boundary honored, one truth spoken cleanly. Not perfectly, honestly. That's how people start seeing you differently. Not all at once, but unmistakably. And the best part, as the world adjusts, you'll realize something even more important. You're no longer asking to be seen. You're standing where you are, and that changes everything.